The roommate's secret, a story from the tale teller. When I first moved into the apartment, it was supposed to be a fresh start. I had just come out of a long-term relationship, and living alone seemed unbearable. So when I found an ad for a roommate in a trendy neighborhood, I jumped at the chance. The rent was reasonable, the place was perfect, and my roommate, Claire, seemed sweet and easygoing. At first, everything was fine. We got along well enough, friendly but not too close. She had her life, and I had mine. I appreciated the space. But there was something about Claire I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was beautiful, in that effortless way some girls are, but she never seemed to date, and she spent a lot of time locked away in her room, always busy with something important she never talked about. I didn't pry. It wasn't my business. But late at night, I'd hear the faint hum of conversation through the thin walls. At first, I thought she was just on the phone, maybe talking to friends or family. But one night, as I passed her door to go to the bathroom, I paused. The voices were low but distinct. Claire was speaking in hushed tones, but I couldn't make out any words. And then, I realized something strange. There was no one else in the apartment. The curiosity gnawed at me for days. I didn't want to be the nosy roommate, but the late-night conversations continued. Sometimes I'd hear Claire laugh softly, or say something that sounded like a plea. Other nights, the conversations were more intense, her voice full of tension. But every time I checked, her room was locked, and there was never anyone else around. One evening, after we'd both gotten home from work, we sat together on the couch, eating takeout and watching a mindless TV show. The air between us was easy, and I decided to finally ask. "So, are you seeing anyone?" I asked casually, hoping she wouldn't find the question too invasive. She laughed lightly, shaking her head. "No, nothing like that." I hesitated for a second, then added, "I just notice you talking late at night sometimes. I thought maybe you had someone over." For the briefest moment, Claire's face froze, but she quickly recovered, flashing me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, just some late-night work calls. You know how it is." I nodded, pretending to buy her excuse, but something about her answer didn't sit right. Who has work calls at 2 a.m.? And why did it feel like she was hiding something? The more I tried to ignore it, the more it bothered me. I found myself obsessing over the voices, the way she'd shut herself away in her room for hours, emerging only when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It was as if she lived two separate lives, the carefree, fun roommate I saw during the day, and someone entirely different behind the closed door of her bedroom at night. One Saturday, Claire left for a weekend trip with her friends, giving me the apartment to myself. I told myself not to snoop, that it wasn't my business. But the curiosity was too strong. I stood outside her room, the door closed tight. My heart raced. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but something in me needed answers. Before I could talk myself out of it, I tried the door. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. The room was surprisingly simple, nothing unusual, except for one thing. On her desk, tucked beneath a pile of papers, was a small notebook. I knew I shouldn't, but I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly. Flipping it open, I expected to find to-do lists or random notes. What I found instead made my heart stop. The pages were filled with names. Dozens of names. Some had dates beside them, others had short notes, descriptions, locations, times. It was meticulous, like something out of a detective's case file. I didn't recognize any of the names, but one thing was clear, this wasn't just some random list. Suddenly, everything clicked. The late-night conversations. The secrecy. The hushed tones. Claire was involved in something big, something dangerous. When Claire returned from her weekend trip, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. I didn't know what the list meant, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to confront her. That night, after we'd both settled in, I casually mentioned the notebook, trying to sound as nonchalant as possible. "Hey, I hope you don't mind," I started, my heart pounding, "but I noticed this notebook on your desk. It's filled with names. What is that?" Her expression instantly shifted. Gone was the laid-back, carefree Claire I thought I knew. She looked at me, her eyes darkening with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Anger? Maybe both. "You shouldn't have looked at that," she said quietly, her voice calm but laced with tension. My mouth went dry. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaking. Claire sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's complicated. Those names. They're people I help. People who need to disappear." "Disappear?" I echoed, my mind racing. She nodded, her expression serious. "I work with an underground organization. We help women in dangerous situations, abusive relationships, stalking, anything where their lives are at risk. We create new identities, get them out before it's too late." I was stunned. Of all the things I had imagined, this wasn't one of them. Claire wasn't involved in something dangerous, she was helping people. But at the same time, it was risky. What if someone found out? What if her work put both of us in danger? "You never said anything," I whispered, trying to process everything. "I couldn't," she said simply. "The less you know, the safer you are." The revelation changed everything. Suddenly, I saw Claire in a completely different light. She wasn't just my quiet, mysterious roommate, she was someone doing incredibly brave work, putting herself on the line to help others. But it also meant that my life wasn't as simple as I thought. I had a choice to make. I could either keep living in ignorance, pretending I didn't know the truth, or I could step up and help her, knowing full well the risks involved. That night, as we sat together in the living room, I looked over at her, a new sense of respect and admiration filling me. "What can I do to help?" I asked, my voice steady. She smiled, her eyes softening. "You are sure?" I nodded. "I'm sure." From that moment on, my life was no longer ordinary. I had stepped into a world of secrets, risks, and danger, but also one of purpose. And with Claire by my side, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.